This is the third part of a three-part series that we have done on Islam this spring. We had John Emery, the executive director of the Islamic Resource Group, did a basic 101. And then we had Dr. Tamara Gray, who spoke about women in Islam. And then tonight, Dr. Tamim Saidi is going to speak about Islam and Christianity. He was born in Afghanistan and as a teenager was forced to leave his family behind and take refuge in Pakistan. He came to the US in 1990 and has since then called Minnesota home. He received his Doctor of Pharmacy from the University of Minnesota and is currently pursuing his Master of Divinity degree in Islamic Studies and Leadership from Bayan Chicago Theological Seminary. He told me he's going to graduate soon, inshallah. So in 2018, he was selected as one of 24 Bush Fellows. In addition, he has served in community leadership positions with many organizations and done interfaith dialogues and a newly formed organization called Nursery, which aims to provide no-interest microloans to eligible borrowers. He has presented to thousands of Minnesotans about Islam and cultures of Muslims. His articles have appeared in Engage Minnesota, Star Tribune, Pioneer Press, USA Today, St. Cloud Times, and Minnesota Daily. And he's also appeared on WCCO and TBTV Almanac. Tamim is a father to 4 children and is a son, husband, and brother. And with that, I will open it up to your presentation. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Can you all still see my slides okay? Okay, great. So wonderful. So glad to be with you today. It's such an honor to be with you. And tonight actually is technically the eve of the month of Ramadan starting. Starting tonight, Ramadan starts at the sunset. Ramadan starts, and Ramadan is going to continue for about a month, the month of fasting, which is a blessed month for Muslims. And I want to urge all of you, if you have time to actually, quite a few of the mosques are working with Minnesota Council of Churches and offering free iftars for people to come and visit a mosque. You can actually go like about an hour before the sunset. They will do a quick presentation. You get to go inside a mosque to see how Muslims pray, have dinner with them, have a discussion with them. I think it's really wonderful. I think if you go to mnchurches.org, I believe it is, then you can actually, it's called Taking Heart Iftars. You can sign up to whatever mosque is closest to you or whatever day works best for you. That might work. Just called MN Churches, Minnesota Churches, as an mnchurches.org or Minnesota Council of Churches. You can do a Google search. Minnesota Council of Churches and Taking Heart Iftars. So I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about the similarities and differences between Islam and Christianity. My challenge is that I think I have compacted a lot of information here for you. I hope that's a good thing. So I have a lot to share with you. What I would like to do is I think Leslie is going to keep an eye on the chat. If you have any questions, please write on the chat your questions. And also every about 7 minutes, 10 minutes, I will stop and take your questions if that's okay. I would like to talk. I think there's quite a few things that are important enough that I want to share with you. But if you have any questions, any clarifications, anything, feel free to interrupt me anytime. You have to raise your voice because I may not see that, because even though right now I do have 2 different screens, but if I don't see you, please do raise your voice or let Leslie know to let me know. So with that, I'm going to start in the name of God. Peace and blessings of God be upon all of God's messengers, including his last messenger, Muhammad, and including Jesus and Moses and Abraham and all of them. So I'm going to start with an Islamic greeting that says, Assalamu alaikum, which means peace be with you or peace be upon you, which the reply to that is wa alaikum assalam. This is a universal greeting for Muslims. And not only for Muslims, this is a greeting that Jesus, peace be upon him, used. I think I mentioned a couple of times in the Bible that Jesus greeted the disciples with this greeting. That's from Luke 24:36. Finding common ground with Christians and with people of the book, which are considered to be Jews and Christians. The Qur'an, there's a verse in the Qur'an. By the way, that's when it says Qur'an 364, you probably know by now, it's chapter 3, verse 64. The Quran says to say, "O people of the book, all Jews and Christians," because Muslims believe before God sent the last revelation, God had sent previous revelation to Jews and Christians. So it says, "O people of the book, let's come to common term between us and you, that we worship none but God, and that we associate no partners with him, and that we make not partners from amongst ourselves as lords and patrons other than God." So there's only one God. We're only going to worship the one God. And it also tells the Muslims that do not dispute, do not argue with people of the book, except in a way which is best, unless those of them who are transgressors, and say to them that we believe in what has been sent down to you and what has been sent down to us. We believe in the Bible, we believe in the Torah and the gospel, and we believe in the Quran as the last revelation. And our God and your God is one, and to him do we submit. And that, I'm sure you know from previous presentations, that when we say is to God we submit, that is officially what Islam is, submission to God. And also Muslims are told that we believe in God and what has he revealed. We believe in Abraham and Ishmael and Isaac and Jacob and the tribe of Israel, and what God had given to Moses and Jesus, and what God had given to all the prophets. And we as Muslims, we make no distinction between any of them. And to him, to God, do we submit. So Muslims are told that we don't say that Muhammad is a better prophet than Jesus, or Jesus is better than Moses, or Moses is better than Abraham. For us, they're all prophets of God. We believe and love and revere all of the prophets of God. Also, in the Quran, chapter 5, verse 32, tells the Muslims that the nearest people to you, the believers, to Muslims, are those who say that we are Christians. So Muslims consider the Christians to be the closest people to them, and says that because amongst them there are those people who are devoted to learning, and those who have renounced the world, and they are not arrogant. So this is what Muslims expect from Christians. And it's also mentioned that God says that we had sent our prophets, and their footsteps we sent Jesus, the son of Mary, on whom God bestowed the gospel, and the heart of those who follow him, and the true followers of Jesus, we have engendered compassion and mercy. So Muslims believe that true Christians are those who are compassionate and merciful people. They are good and kind people, based on what the Quran teaches. And then there's also, this verse is almost like almost an identical verse repeated twice. It says that the Muslims, the believers, the Jews, the Christians, the Sabians, all those who believe in God on the last day and do good deeds, will have their reward with their Lord. No fear for them, nor will they grieve. This verse is mentioned twice in the Quran. So lastly, I think before I stop here, many years ago, I think probably about 20 years ago, probably longer, I did my first presentation for a 6th grade class somewhere, I think Minnetonka, Hopkins, somewhere around there. I finished entire Islam 101 presentation. There was a kid at the back. I remember his name. His name was David. So David raised his hand and said, so with all that you mentioned, Islam is closer to Christianity than Judaism is to Christianity, and Islam is closer to Judaism than Christianity is to Judaism, even though these two religions are very close together. Right? And I thought that was an amazing observation. Islam is closer to Christianity even closer than Judaism is, by believing in Jesus, by believing him as a Messiah, by believing in his second coming, by believing in his miracles. So Islam is closer to Christianity than Judaism is. And Islam is also closer to Judaism than Christianity is by not worshiping Jesus, peace be upon him, by worshiping the only God who sent them. And I thought that was an amazing observation by that 6th grader student. So I think from any non-Christian religion in the world, Islam is the closest religion to Christianity. Excuse me. Let's take some questions. Any questions, comments?
I think that people can't unmute themselves, but if anyone has questions, go ahead and put them in the chat, and then I can read them. We don't have anything yet. If you want to,
We don't. Okay, good.
yes.
I think I'm doing a really good job, right? I'm not leaving any questions unanswered, so I think everything is good.
Being covered. Yep, you're
Right?
doing
Everything is being covered, so that's good. So okay, so Islam, as you heard, it's not Islam, it's Islam. Islam, by definition, means peace through submission to God, peace through submission to God's will. It comes from two different Arabic root words, Salm and then Taslama, peace and submission to God. According to Muslims, how the way that Muslims understand Islam, this monotheism and then submission to God is what Jesus taught. It's what Moses taught. It's what Abraham taught. It's all the prophets taught. Like a lowercase, the generic Islam, generic monotheism and submission to God. And there's actually, right now, actually, the last few months, I have been doing a Facebook discussion, almost like a weekly blog, weekly post on the Bible through the Muslim goggles. The Bible through the Muslim goggles, that I actually see so many things that is, and the way that when I read the Bible with Muslim goggles, I see Jesus, peace be upon him, teaching exactly the Islam that Muhammad taught. You know, there's not a lot of difference between what they taught about submission to God. That's one of the statements from Matthew and from John, talking about the submission, submitting one's will to the will of God, being obedient to the will of God. That's essentially what Islam is. Muslims are the one who submits to God. I think you saw this already, so I'm going to skip over this quickly. Islam is one of the monotheisms. Muslims believe in the one God. Actually, in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are called the three Abrahamic monotheisms because they come from Abraham, peace be upon him, and they believe in the one God, the God of Abraham. There is generally a question, sometimes I get this question, that do Muslims and Christians worship the same God? So I usually tell people, let me tell you which God I worship, then you can tell me if you worship the same God or not. I worship the one God who created the universe out of nothing. He created everything out of nothing. Do you worship the same God? I worship the one God who created Adam and Eve. Do you worship that God? I worship the God of Abraham. Do you worship the God of Abraham? I worship the God who spoke to Moses, peace be upon him. Do you worship the God who spoke to Moses? I worship the God that Jesus worshiped. Do you worship the same God? If you do, and we believe there's only one God, then we believe in the one God. If not, then we can have a discussion. Sometimes I think this discussion becomes somehow controversial because sometimes Christians would say, well, we believe we worship the same God as the Jews, but no, we don't worship the same God as the Muslims, even though the Jews also don't believe in a triune God. So this is something like a quick discussion, just to understand that Muslims believe in the one God, the God of Abraham, the God, the creator of the universe, which is, by the way, if we all believe there's only one God, then we worship the one God. How we believe and understand about that God is different, but nonetheless, that's the one God. I'm going to skip over these because I think you guys covered these already. If you have questions, let me know. And I think I should just mention, just like, Christians around the world, about 2 billion Christians, maybe 2.2 billion Christians now they have one religion, but they have so many different cultures. Same is true for Muslims. Muslims, even though they have one religion, their cultures are very different. Muslims, for example, in Indonesia would have a different culture than Muslims in India, than Muslims in Afghanistan, where I grew up, than Muslims in Somalia, than Muslims in Germany, than Muslims in the United States. So the cultures are different, even though the religion is the same. The same is, I think, true for Christians. Now, I would say, like, for example, a Catholic from Minnesota would have a different culture than Catholic from Mexico, than Catholic from Argentina, than a Catholic in Nigeria, than a Catholic in Vietnam, right? Or the same with Protestants as well. So even though they have the same religion, their cultures are different. We talk about, I'm sure you know about this, Muslims believe in God, the angels, the prophets, the holy books, including the Torah, the Psalm, the Gospel. We'll talk about that. And the last, the Qur'an, the Day of Judgment, and divine plan. I think these are all similarities that Muslims have in common. Muslims and Christians have in common. We'll talk about the name Allah in a little while. Again, even when it comes to the 5 pillars of Islam, believing monotheism, prayer, almsgiving, fasting, pilgrimage. This is not unique to Muslims. Christians and Jews also believe and practice these. They practice monotheism, prayer, almsgiving, fasting, and pilgrimage to the holy places. So this is also, we have a lot of those and generally in common, even though the details might be different. So these are the 5 pillars of Islam. Excuse me, I just came back, by the way, a couple of days ago from pilgrimage to Mecca and Medina. So I think probably picked up something there. So I have a little sore throat and my voice is a little coarse, so I apologize for that.